I'm not one to ship any two characters, especially if they're not canonically together, but I feel like this relationship is an exception. If you're a Stranger Things fan, you may or may not know about the popular ship of Byler, which is the possibility of a romantic relationship between Mike Wheeler and Will Byers. Most people will just brush this relationship off as just another delusion, but I would like to argue it is more than that. To prove this, I'm also going to go over a few other romances in Stranger Things and compare them to this one. I'm also going to cover other people's reasons for dismissing this relationship. Obviously, if we're going to talk about Mike and Will's relationship, we first have to talk about Mike's relationship with Eleven. This is the main argument that people make for Byler not being canon. Oh, this is the flagship romance of the show. They couldn't possibly destroy 4 seasons of build-up just for Mike to get with Will. First off, while not as much in a romantical sense, Mike and Will have had just as much, if not more development as Mike and Eleven. In season 1, Mike's only goal is to track down and rescue Will, and he only shows interest in Eleven after he realizes she has powers and might know something about where Will is. In season 2, other than the fact that he tries to reach Eleven every day, Mike spends the entire season at Will's side, even staying on the floor of his bedroom and in very uncomfortable hospital chairs at night to keep watch on him and make sure he's okay. In season 3, Mike and Eleven are dating for a while, about 6 months, but Hopper indirectly gets them to break up. Then, for a majority of the season, Mike just sort of mopes around and they only get back together near the end of the show. They sort of treat their breakup as a joke. Will is struggling to grow up at the same pace as his friends, due to him being kidnapped and then possessed by the Mind Flayer. When he sets up a D&D campaign to try and salvage some of his lost childhood, Mike and Lucas are extremely rude to him, which causes Will to get upset and leave. Mike realizes that he's been really awful to Will, and bikes all the way to his house in the pouring rain just to apologize. You would think he'd do the same with Eleven, but he mostly just waits for her to call him on the phone. Now we've come to my final point, which is that season 4 was mainly spent tearing down Mike and Eleven's relationship. Eleven is upset because in all of his letters, Mike never once says that he loves Eleven. When she confronts him on this, Mike claims that she should know that he does, but he still never explicitly says it. Now this is an interesting thing to point out because none of the other couples on the show have to say that they love each other, because it is shown through their actions. Joyce travels to the Soviet Union, almost dying on multiple occasions to rescue Hopper from the prison, and Hopper will do basically anything to make sure Joyce is safe. Lucas spends the entire season worrying about Max and staying by her side, even when she's in a coma. Nancy and Jonathan basically do everything together until they get separated in season 4. So why is it that Mike needs to tell Eleven that he loves her for her to believe it? The only times Mike has ever said that he loves Eleven is when she isn't able to respond. Mike also never compliments Eleven on anything other than the fact that she has superpowers. If we look back on season 1, he does the exact same thing, only taking interest in her after he figures out that she has superpowers. Even during the speech that he... Why are you... Get off the mic, bro. Even during the speech that he is giving to save her life, all he can really compliment her on is her powers. He can barely even talk about his emotions with Eleven, whereas with Will, they have like 5 different heart-to-heart scenes together in season 4. You cannot tell me that there wasn't a reason why Mike and Eleven were separated for the entire season. In one of these heart-to-hearts, Mike explains to Will that he is afraid that Eleven will realize that she doesn't need him anymore, and that he doesn't feel special. It is Will that makes Mike feel needed, not Eleven. He just doesn't realize because Will is telling him this through the perspective of Eleven. I don't think there are any 2 characters that interact this way with each other that haven't been in a romantic relationship at some point. Mike doesn't speak to Dustin or Lucas in nearly the same way as he speaks to Will. It's like a night and day difference. It just proves to me that people that won't at least consider the possibility of this are just being extremely close-minded, and maybe that if Will was a girl, people might be at least slightly more on board with this idea. Which leads me to my second romance, which is the one of Joyce Byers and Jim Hopper, because it absolutely baffles me that people do not have a bigger problem with this romance. In the first season, there is literally no romantic tension between these 2 characters, and in season 2, Joyce has a new boyfriend, and Hopper takes in Eleven as his responsibility. They do have quite a few scenes together, particularly the one at the snowball, but even then there was still no visible romantic relationship. Then in season 3, they try to push this really awkward romance between the two, which ends up just being pretty annoying. It completely destroys the amazing friendship they had in the first 2 seasons, and is just a blatant case of heteronormativity and how any guy and girl with chemistry, regardless if it is purely platonic or not, have to end up with each other. It just made me completely hate this relationship, even more than season 3 had already made me at that point. What's weirder is that when they try to introduce this as a plausible romantic pair, Joyce doesn't seem to be into Hopper in that way whatsoever, but by the end, she just does? It feels so lazy and unearned that they didn't even try to develop this romance at all, just assuming that people would be on board with it, and a majority of people were. Maybe if they actually tried to develop their friendship into a romance naturally instead of forcing it onto us, I would have been more on board with it, but they didn't do that, so I still hate it. I don't want to keep hating on Stranger Things though, so let's talk about the relationship of Lucas and Max, which is in my opinion the best romance on the show. The reason I love this romance so much compared to the last 2 is that they don't try to force it on us for the sake of having another romantic pair, but rather show their progression naturally through the course of seasons 2 and 4. In season 2, Lucas and Max start off as friends that progress naturally into something more, and when they break up in season 4, Lucas doesn't resent her or anything, he just keeps trying to be her friend and be there for her because he knows that is what she needs at that moment. I think this points out my biggest problem with Mike and Eleven's romance, which is that their relationship is heavily underdeveloped. Other than a small while in season 1, they don't really spend much time as friends. Most of their time is just spent being super lovey-dovey, rather than actually showing care and affection for each other. It looks like Lucas is gonna be spending a majority of his time at Max's side in season 5, which I appreciate, even though they probably won't be interacting too much. I love their relationship, and if any romance were going to be endgame, I want it to be this one. I think the biggest takeaway from my research on this topic is that if Byler does in fact come to fruition, I think it could very well redeem the character of Mike Wheeler, who is someone that a majority of the fanbase has grown to hate. I don't blame them. He's a complete jerk to both Eleven and especially Will very often. However, I think that if Mike is gay or bisexual, he could very well be one of the most well-written characters on the show. He just seems like another character that was mishandled in season 3 and 4 due to his drastic shift in character. In seasons 1 and 2, he's very kind and benevolent, particularly towards Eleven in season 1 and especially Will in season 2. However, in season 3, he just becomes really rude and unlikable. He is extremely disrespectful towards Hopper and so incredibly mean to Will for no clear reason. However, if we dig deeper, there could actually be a plausible answer as to why Mike had such a drastic shift in character. If we look into his argument with Will, we see Mike get rather defensive when he calls girls stupid, and then proceeds to tell Will that it's not his fault he doesn't like girls, showing that he may have some internalized homophobia, especially coming from a conservative family in the 80s. This is really interesting, because we know that Mike normally isn't a homophobic person, as shown through his acts in season 1. In season 4, Mike goes to California to visit the Byers and Eleven during their spring break. He is super insufferable in the beginning when Eleven hits Angela in the head with a rollerblade. Keep in mind that this girl has little to no grasp on how humans are supposed to behave, since she was a literal lab rat for 12 years. So to yell at her and get this upset and petty over it is honestly disgusting. Not only this, but he is also really awful to Will, particularly in their fight scene at Rinkomania. Here, he gets upset at Will for apparently ruining the whole night by being third-wheeled by him and Eleven. Will retorts that Mike really hasn't made much effort to stay friends with Will, only calling him a few times in a year, while Eleven has piles of letters from him. If we look into it further, we find that this might not actually be the case. In season 3, they discuss how Mike and Eleven won't be able to call each other on the phone due to the possibility of government officials listening in. So their only options are to write letters and use Dustin's ham radio to reach each other on their walkies. However, it is revealed that Mike actually does try to reach their house phone a lot, but can rarely get in touch due to Joyce's job as a telemarketer. Whether this is just a big continuity error or a genuine detail we're supposed to pick up on is up to interpretation for now. But it doesn't seem like something they would just forget, especially since we see the walkie in Eleven's room. Back to the main topic at hand. Mike claims that the reason he keeps in touch with Eleven is that she's his girlfriend, but when Will asks, "And what about us?" Mike yells, "We're friends." Guys, I'm not sure he took that the right way. And if all of this wasn't enough proof, the music that starts playing when Mike and Will begin their argument is called "In the Closet" at Rinkomania. Okay, they're just queer-baiting at this point. Now that I've gone over my thoughts, I want to discuss the opinions of other fans on the topic. There are a lot of reasons for people liking and not liking this ship, but I first want to talk about the intense amount of toxicity and homophobia in the Stranger Things community, because it is absolutely deplorable. Specifically on the Stranger Things Reddit, just the mere mention of the possibility of Mike and Will getting together gets you shut down or even your whole post removed. It got so bad that all of the Byler fans started migrating to the actual Byler subreddit, only for some snakes to slither in as well and start shutting it down there too. Just let these people have their subreddit, man. They've gone through enough. On the actual Stranger Things Reddit, there are a few Byler posts that have stood the test of time, but are flooded with people just completely dismissing the idea. Let's start with an example. This is someone's response to the question, have you ever noticed any homophobia targeted towards Byler fans on the subreddit? The user replies, I've never noticed it personally. Not saying it isn't a thing. But I think shutting down Byler is more that it's very obvious that Mike isn't gay, and it also simplifies the complexities of what Will would be going through with that internal conflict of wanting someone that can't want you in the same way. First of all, people really shouldn't be shutting down Byler, period. After all, it's just a non-canon ship with a very dedicated fanbase. Second of all, I think people who claim for 100% fact that Mike Wheeler isn't gay or even bisexual are just turning down this ship without even looking at any of the evidence people have given. And it isn't like the evidence is stretching either. Usually this community is making extremely valid points that are just completely overlooked in fear of having to make an argument. Third of all, I believe that Mike and Will getting together wouldn't simplify that internal struggle at all, as he would most likely continue with that conflict through most of the season. Even then, it's so boring to just pull the gay character like straight character that can't like them back trope once again. Especially on Will of all people, the guy that has been kidnapped, tortured, controlled, and traumatized, only to come back and get forgotten by all of his friends. And you're telling me that on top of that, he also gets a doomed romance plotline as well? Also, it isn't like Will's sexuality is the only part of his character. He should have other characteristics too, like his strong emotional center and his past traumatic experiences. This second one is claiming that people are put off by the specific ship of Byler because it goes against the point of their friendship. They say that they are fine with others shipping Robin and Nancy, but not Robin and Steve, because in the latter, Robin is a lesbian, meaning that she can't love Steve in the same way that he could love her. I think the actual reason that people have no problem with shipping Robin and Nancy is because they don't see a possibility of it happening. 99% of people that ship these two characters are just doing it for the jokes, and don't actually have any plausible evidence to support it. With Byler, there's a fairly large community that has come up with many claims that are very difficult to just disregard as delusional. The third and by far dumbest claim I've seen reads as follows. Focusing on Mike and Will in this way diminishes Mike and Eleven's relationship. I think Will's character deserves to be more than just his sexuality. His story had so much potential when he was trapped in the Upside Down, but then the writers changed his whole purpose. Now he just whines and gawks at Mike. When I imagine if Will was a girl named Wendy, I would find her selfish for acting like she deserves Mike instead of respecting his relationship with Eleven. But Will's a guy, and a demographic of the audience wants him to get with Mike, so the selfishness gets magically excused. Whatever the writers do, I'm pretty sure it will be handled poorly, because it's always handled poorly when you have a hetero and non-hetero audience to appease. First of all, I do agree that Will's character should be more than his sexuality, but there's just no way you think that is his only character trait in season 4. Yeah, he has a crush on Mike, but he also is the emotional support that he needs to keep going, and it's not like he has to have a crush on Mike for that to work. Point 2 that this user makes is that if Will was a girl, they would find her selfish for acting like she deserves Mike instead of respecting the fact that he is already in a relationship. This is the claim that really broke me. Will did not once state or show that he went through this season thinking that he deserved Mike. He literally showed the exact opposite in multiple scenes. He, for one, actively contributed to repairing Mike's relationship with Eleven, once when they were talking in the buyer's house, another when they were in the van, and a final time when he pushed Mike to try and motivate Eleven during the piggyback. He has shown that he is one of the most selfless people on the show, and that he has always respected Mike's relationship with Eleven, and him being a girl wouldn't change that. There isn't any selfishness to get excused, regardless if he is a girl or a boy. Their third claim is that this relationship will be handled poorly no matter what they do. because they have both a hetero and non-hetero audience to satisfy. I'm really not sure how to tackle this in a way that I'm equipped to, but I will say this. Not everyone that ships Mike and Eleven is straight, and not everyone that ships Mike and Will is gay. It's not as black and white as that. No show is ever going to satisfy every single person that watches it. The problem is that whether or not it was queerbaiting or something more, byler is a relationship that has been set up. They could have just resolved this in season 4 if it wasn't going to be important, but they didn't do that.